Joining us now to discuss trade negotiations with China and South Korea is retired Colonel Grant Newsham, Senior Fellow at the Center for Security Policy and author of the book When China Attacks. Good afternoon, Colonel. So starting off with China, the U.S. has said these negotiations were very constructive, but still we didn't get a concrete deal. So how would you describe the current state of U.S.-China trade relations and your comments on the deal?
Well, it's really the United States trying to cut a trade deal with a country that has no intention of following any promises it makes. Uh, yes, you can make the effort, but I wouldn't expect to get a deal that lasts or that has any effect. It may be enough to declare victory for a short while, but this administration will find that any deal it cuts with China is not going to pay off. And these are smart people on our side. They know what China is like. And President Trump knows how China stiffed him the first time around. He's under no illusions as well. So I'm curious to see how this is going to play out. It could be the U.S. side is making every effort to say, look, we tried, but you just didn't cooperate, so we're going to have to really hammer you with the tariffs and other things. It could be that that's what happens, but the Chinese are playing their rare earth stranglehold very well, and they are making it hard for the Americans.
So on this issue specifically, what happened recently with the deal not going through? What do you think contributed to that? Just on this specific conversation, what do you think contributed to a lack of deal being reached?
Well, I think the Chinese digging in their heels wouldn't give the Americans what they want, wouldn't give them enough to be able to say that they've reached an agreement, even if they know it isn't going to last. And I think it is the Chinese who are responsible for this not going anywhere on this occasion.
So Treasury Secretary Besson says that the U.S. wants to de-risk with China, not decouple. How achievable is this? Do you think through trade negotiations, have we seen that?
I think the trade negotiations with China are almost irrelevant in a certain sense because we've had so many years, so many negotiations where we tried to fix things and nothing's worked. And this has been going on for well over 20 years. So it is going to take a question of leadership and will on the part of the Trump administration to actually force US companies out of the China market. And you can see what they're doing now with other countries is to get them to realize that, look, if you want to do business with America, you're going to have to make things here. You're going to have more balanced trade. Whereas before, just about every other country was thinking, well, we'll sell things to the Americans, but we'll also do as much business as possible with China. Mr. Trump is setting things up actually to gradually shift the other nations, the trading system, away from its really pathologic dependence on the China market.
So I think I do see at least a difference between the current Trump administration and the first Trump administration. I'm wondering if you think perhaps China sees it differently as well, that it's dealing with a different Trump than it was dealing in 2016.
Well, I think the Chinese know that very well. Mr. Trump has actually dealt with the Chinese, and he knows what they're like. But even more, I'm very impressed with Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent. Compared to the previous Secretary of Treasury during the first Trump administration, that was Steve Mnuchin, who was basically Goldman Sachs representative and Wall Street's representative in the White House, which was really China's representative. They did everything they could to keep the Americans from cracking down on China, from furthering U.S. national interests. You really had to see it. The current Secretary of Treasury, he knows how the game's played, and so I'm curious to see how this plays out. But it's a very different administration when you've got a Secretary of Treasury who's actually on America's side as opposed to China's side.
Do you think that this difference will give China more hesitation if it reaches a deal, whether it's going to live up to that deal or break it? Is it going to hesitate a little bit?
Oh, I think they'll hesitate because they know they don't have quite as many friends in this administration as they did in the last one. And also their Wall Street friends, the donor class, doesn't have nearly as much effect on Mr. Trump as it has on other presidents, other administrations. But getting China to live up to a trade agreement, they will only do it if they have no alternative to it. It's just not something they do. It's a really almost habit on their part to break trade agreements. And I'm not saying that glibly. Just go back to what's happened since they got into the World Trade Organization, since they got most favored nation status. Name an agreement they've lived up to. So after really a couple decades of empirical evidence, it's not too hard to figure out what is going to happen in terms of China living up to its promises. But as I said, they've got a better hand to play now than they've ever had, given the dependency that they have really gotten the Americans and other free nations and other nations to sort of develop so that they think we have to be in China. And also, if you want pharmaceuticals, if you want rare earths, if you want magnets, all the things that modern manufacturing needs, well, China's got the upper hand on that. So it's not as easy to deal with the Chinese as it was a while back, and it wasn't easy even then.
Do you think the US has enough power, or does it hold more leverage over China, so much so that it can pressure China to keep its promises?
I think if we're willing to sort of play rough, and that means putting very, very high tariffs on them, restraining investment that goes into China, making it hard for China to get access to US dollars, convertible currency, and also, as we're doing now, getting our allies to actually start doing more business with us and looking at us as a sort of a manufacturing base. Reestablish America's industrial base and get our spending in order, and that will give us a very, very good hand to play. Ultimately, China depends on exports, and if it can't export and earn that convertible currency, it's got some very, very serious problems. So the United States, as I said, it has a good hand to play, and poker to be 3 or 4 aces if it chose to play it. We remains to be seen just how serious we are.
Okay, shifting gears a little bit, I want your assessment as well on the trade deal President Trump struck with South Korea. What do you think about that?
Oh, it looks good. The Koreans have agreed to invest 300 billion into the United States and into some important areas: shipbuilding, chips, pharmaceuticals, infrastructure, energy as well. And they're going to buy a lot of our gas, et cetera. And I believe there's no tariffs on US goods going into Korea. The South Koreans got a 15% rate, which is about what our friends seem to be getting. And they can live with that. So it looks good on paper. But there is one aspect of this, and that is that the new regime in South Korea is not pro America, it's pro China, pro North Korea. So you're trying to sort of balance the political aspects of this with the economic, and that's tough for any administration to do. The South Korean administration regime might think that it got a pretty good deal if for $450 billion they got the US administration to sort of stamp the seal of approval on the regime that took power in an election that was questionable, but also it is a regime that is fundamentally not pro-America. But on paper, it looks like a good deal, and the fact they've even cut a deal that has a certain value of its own.
Okay, one last question. What is the role that South Korea plays in the US's Indo-Pacific strategy?
Well, in the event of a fight over Taiwan, for example, you can expect the North Koreans to make a move of some sort, and we are counting on the South Koreans to defend themselves, defend the peninsula, because we don't have extra resources to devote to it. The Japanese don't as well. So you are expecting the South Koreans to sort of pull their weight as a member of an alliance of free nations. And ultimately, the big thing is, I think, a Taiwan fight is what people are thinking about. But you do want a South Korea, which is fundamentally pro US on our side, on the free nation side, and is not willing to concede or make concessions to the People's Republic of China. The South Koreans are part of really what should be a solid alliance, a solid barrier opposed by Korea, Japan, the United States, Taiwan, and Philippines, and others. We're counting on that. It remains to be seen. As it's a very different administration in South Korea now.
Okay, Colonel, thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.